Hi, I am Pavit and I am going to explain Flow Orchestrator in this video. And to explain that, the points you are going to see in this video, the types and building blocks of Orchestrator, what is Orchestrator. Third point is when should you use Orchestrator, and in the last I'm going to create a Orchestrator and going to demo the types and building block of Orchestrator. So just create a new flow, and in that you can see all the templates and then Orchestrator, and here two options are to select. One is auto launch and one is trigger flow. So once you select the auto launch, you will go to the flow screen where you can add stages and steps into the flow. So stages are basically the uh, combination of steps, or we can say we may have more than one steps in a stage, and we can decide based on our requirement. And on the stages we can create two types of steps, like background step and interaction step. In background steps, normally you can create or or launch a flow where any update will happen. So you just need to select a flow, an existing flow that will update or made any action on that flow. Condition is decide when this steps will execute, when the stage. So there are condition is selected when the stage starts, the step starts. So like stage one is start on the execution once the trigger is slow. Second is when another step is marked complete, the step is start. And the third is when a specific evaluation criteria or flow return the true or false. So we can also execute a flow on this condition, and based on the return value of flow, that step will enter or execute. So now I'm going to select here normal the first when the stage start, because that is the first step, so that will execute on stage start, or you can select any one according to your requirement. Another is step type is the interaction. So interaction basically used to get input from a specific user. So in interaction you can select any screen flow, and when that interaction will execute the condition, you can also decide your condition, select a flow that you want to use, and you can pass the parameter also, like the record id. Any existing flow can be used, and you can get the record id from the flow resources. So to get the record id, you can pass any id from the flow resources, and based on that id the flow will get that id and execute accordingly. We can use that interaction steps on record page also. And specify assigned user. So basically here we can assign that steps or assign that step to any user, group or queues. So if you select any user, the user lookup will be there, you can select any user. If you select group or lookup is there, you can select any group or queue. So these are the assigned types. Based on the assigned type, the lookup value will be changed. If you select any user, you can select any. If the type is user, then you can select any user, or if the type is queue, you can select any queue also. We can set the exit condition also, like when the steps is marked complete, then this step can exit, or we can execute another flow, and based on that return value we can decide that. There are two types of orchestration. One is auto launch and second is record trigger. So auto launch is basically we can call from the flow URL, or the, we can say, custom URL that we get from that we have in the flow properties. So if we execute that URL from Apex or any executable step, then we can call the custom URL, and the trigger is normally as flow trigger. We can, based on, execute based on any record change or record trigger, as we have same as flow trigger. So these are the two types of orchestrator we can create. And another next block is steps. So steps, basically you can have more than one steps also, based on your logic or requirement complexity, and you can add steps also. Steps are two types. One is interactive step and background step, as you have seen also. So interactive steps basically used to get the input from user, or user will interact with the interactive step. And background step are basically the automations or any automation flow that you want to execute based on, for that record, based on any condition. So you can automate any action also in background steps. So flow are the parts of interaction step and background steps also. So if we talk about building blocks and types, these all are the types and blocks. Next is when to use the orchestrator. So if you remember, approval process mostly used to get any approval on any specific record. So based on any criteria, we can decide the criteria, and on that criteria approval process steps will execute, and record will go in lock state. I can create a separate video for record lock. If you want, please comment if you like to see how we can use record lock and unlock. So approval steps have the workflow actions. We can execute these actions based on the approval or rejection. Like if based on that criteria that decided in the approval process, the record will goes to the user, or to the user, and user can approve or reject that request. So based on approval and rejection, the workflow action we can execute. We can create any field update and email alerts, like actions, those we have in workflow. So earlier, how that's how approval process works earlier, like that mostly used to get any approval on any specific record. In flow orchestrator, same, we can interact and communicate with the users by assigning those records to the users. And flow orchestrator allow us to interact with the different users and process. So when you need to interact with multiple user, and based on those inputs you need to do some automations also. So these type of requirement or situations where we can use the orchestrator, like if we want some input from different user on a specific steps or stages. Like first I want to share that record on lower hierarchy of the role, and then goes to the upper role hierarchy. So to maintain that hierarchy, to assign those records also, so stages and steps help us to assign based on the hierarchy also. Like if we have stages also in flow orchestrator. So stages like first stage, second stage, and user one is lower hierarchy, user two is higher hierarchy. So if I want to do something or get some input from the lower hierarchy of user one, and user two have, let's say user two have higher hierarchy, then based on the stages that execute, first go to the user one, then go to the user two. So these type of requirement we can achieve by flow orchestrator. And if we want input from multiple user and we do not want to do a email chain for those users, we can use Salesforce orchestrator. If you remember, approval process also used to get some approval on some records in earlier, but once flow comes in the picture, that opens up all the opportunities and ideas to create the complex and wonderful solutions for these type of requirements. So in if we talk about approval process have workflow actions only. Those we can create only workflow like actions, but in workflow actions has their own limitations, and to overcome those limitations, flow comes in the picture with flow orchestrator, and that uh, break those limitations also. So we can use flow to get this type of requirements. So to demo flow orchestrator, I am going to use existing orchestrator that I have created, that is trigger type of orchestrator, and that is working on create and update. And I have specified a criteria where department is equal to id and email is equal to null when this orchestrator will execute. And that orchestrator have a stage. I have made that simple so that it's understandable. So these this stage have two steps. One is a interaction step, and the second one is background step. So the interaction step basically getting the email value from the user, and that email value will going to update on the contact record. So on the screen the email field is only available, and user will input the email, and that will going to update on the contact by that flow. And the second step, that is background step, that is basically automatically update the title to static value it, and condition is when another step is mark complete. So this steps this step will execute once step 1 is completed. So that is the condition I have assigned, and that flow basically updating the department of the title of the contact, and uh, yeah, the title of the contact. So that is existing flow, and I have assigned the static value it to the title. So these are the two steps, and second steps basically runs when the interactive steps will complete. So once step 1 is complete, then the second step will work. So to demo that, I'm going to create a contact, and as we have the criteria in our orchestrator, the department is it and email equals to null, and I have assigned my user to assign that user, like I am this orchestrator will assign that record to my user. So I'm going to create a contact with the department id, and email is null. So with that criteria the orchestrator will execute, and as in interaction step I have specified the user, so that record will assign to that user. That record is created, and you can see on the record screen you can interact by using that component, the orchestrator work guide. And if I am going to email, so I have also received the email for that step. So as I have assigned to my user, so my user email will receive an email, and if I click on that link, that will redirect to that record, and that record have a component orchestrator work guide. So here that steps 1 interaction flow is running, and that is going to update the email to that contact. So the first, once the first step is complete, the background step also will automatically run and update the title also. Let me refresh that page so that you will see the updated value of the record. So go to the detail, and here you can see the title is updated IT by the background step, and the email is updated by the interaction steps that is available as work guide or orchestrator work guide component. If you want to add that work guide component on the record page, you just edit the page and you can find the uh, orchestrator work guide in the components. That component you can add on your page, and that will populate your steps, and your those steps will be interactive, or you update those value and you can see those fields available once that record is assigned to you. Until if the record is not match that criteria, then you will not see any action to do, as you can see with that record also. So if the criteria is matched and record is assigned to you, then you can interact with that component. So that's all. If you have any question, you can comment. Thanks for watching.